Welcome back to philosopherstalk.com, where thinkers discuss. I am Henry George, and we are continuing our debate with Karl Marx on whether the single tax on land values is sufficient to end poverty. In Part 1, we laid out our core positions and steelmanned each other's arguments. I believe we established that the land value tax rests on genuinely solid economic foundations, which even Karl acknowledged, however reluctantly.
I acknowledge the logic of one component of your argument. I did not endorse the conclusion that one component constitutes a complete solution to the most serious problem in human history. I want that distinction to be entirely clear.
Duly noted, and I appreciate the precision.
I did not do it for your appreciation.
I know, and I appreciate that too.
The fundamental problem with your framework is that it treats poverty as a revenue distribution problem. Collect the land rent flowing to private landlords, return it to the public treasury, abolish taxes on labor, and poverty dissolves. But poverty is not a hydraulics problem. Poverty is a power problem. Working people are powerless in the workplace, where they must accept whatever the employer offers or go without. Powerless in the political system, which the capitalist class shapes through its newspapers, its political funding, and its domination of the courts. A tax reform does not touch any of those structures of power. Not one.
The single most important reason workers lack bargaining power is that they have no viable alternative to wage labor. They cannot farm independently because land is monopolized. Remove that monopoly through the land value tax, and genuine economic alternatives become available for the first time. When labor has real alternatives, the employer cannot dictate terms. The fundamental power relationship shifts. You cannot achieve the political transformation you want without first achieving the economic transformation that makes it possible.
You are describing a marketplace of free and equal individuals who simply need their options expanded by sensible fiscal policy. I am describing a system of structural power in which owners of capital shape the rules, the culture, the politics, and the possibilities of everyone else. These are not different emphases. They are different understandings of what capitalism actually is.
Land monopoly is the keystone of that entire arch. Remove it, and the arch weakens fundamentally. Land reforms in Ireland, Denmark, Taiwan, and Australia showed genuine improvement in working people's conditions wherever they were honestly attempted. The evidence is not purely theoretical.
The evidence from America, where land was abundant throughout the 19th century, is that wage labor and capitalist exploitation flourished magnificently on the frontier alongside all of that available land. Workers remained dependent and poorly compensated even in the most land-rich environment in human history. Your own theory predicts that should have been impossible.
The American frontier was not freely available land in my sense. It was being actively enclosed by railroad corporations and land speculators, often with direct federal assistance, at the very moment workers were supposedly free to access it. That enclosure confirms my analysis rather than refuting it.
A very convenient interpretation.
Your entire theory rests on workers seizing and managing the means of production collectively. I want that for workers as ardently as you do. What I cannot accept is the mechanism, because every version of it requires concentrating enormous power in the hands of whoever manages the collective enterprise. And power concentrated without accountability, without the genuine ability to dissent or organize in opposition, has never in human history produced justice. It has always produced tyranny, regardless of the intentions behind it.
In true collective ownership, the workers themselves manage democratically. There is no separate managerial class, because there is no separate managerial class at all.
And the experience of revolutionary socialist governments suggests that transition from workers as employees to workers as managers never occurs as smoothly as the theory predicts. A new administrative class appears with considerable speed and proves remarkably determined to defend its privileges against the workers it was installed to serve.
Those governments began from the wrong conditions. Marxist theory requires advanced industrial capitalism as its base, not agrarian feudalism. Of course, the results were distorted.
I find it remarkable that your theory is unfalsifiable by any actual historical evidence. Every failure is a distortion. Every catastrophe is a misapplication. The pure theory remains permanently pristine because it has never been tested under the exact conditions it specifies. And whenever it is tested under different conditions, the disasters do not count. That is a comfortable position for a theorist. It is less comfortable for the people living through the disasters.
Your theory was implemented in land reforms across Australia, New Zealand, and American municipalities throughout the 19th century. Poverty was not ended or substantially reduced. By your own logic, that is decisive empirical evidence against the land value tax.
Those implementations were partial, never applied at the full rate my theory requires. A partial remedy produces partial results. That is entirely consistent with the theory.
And the implementations of my theory were distorted and incomplete. The same standard applies in both directions.
It does. I said something very like that in part 1, which you found irritating.
I find most things you say irritating, the agreeable ones most of all.
I notice you are never more cutting than when I say something you cannot honestly dispute.
Your single tax requires the state to accurately assess the value of every parcel of land in the entire economy, continuously as values shift. It must be administered honestly enough not to be captured by the very landlord class it is designed to tax. And it must be politically sustained against the fierce, organized opposition of every landowner in the country. You are proposing a perfectly administered, incorruptible tax system operating within the very state that the landlord class has been shaping to its purposes for centuries. Where precisely do you propose to find this government?
The same objection applies to collective ownership, Karl. Managing the entire means of production demands administrators who are competent, honest, and immune to the corrupting influence of power. If the state cannot be trusted to assess land values, it certainly cannot be trusted to operate every factory, farm, and railway in the nation.
The socialist state represents entirely different class interests than the capitalist state.
And there is the beautiful circularity. The revolution produces the right kind of state. The right kind of state produces genuine collective ownership. Genuine collective ownership produces liberated workers. And none of it can be evaluated by reference to any state that has ever actually existed. The theory is permanently insulated from reality.
Your imperturbable reasonableness is becoming genuinely provoking, George.
I have been told that before, and I never quite know how to respond to it.
The patient is dying of a systemic disease, and you are offering a better brand of aspirin.
The patient has consistently, in every country where given a genuine choice, preferred the aspirin to the amputation. Democratic working people have repeatedly declined your revolution when it was offered peacefully. They have only ever lived under it when it was imposed by force.
Because the ruling class controls the information available to working people and shapes their understanding of their own interests. False consciousness is a documented and systematic feature of capitalist society.
So working people are too deceived to understand their own interests, and a revolutionary vanguard will exercise power on their behalf until they develop the correct consciousness? Karl, do you hear yourself? Do you genuinely not see the structure of what you are describing?
I am describing the reality of ideological domination under capitalism. Your discomfort reflects the accuracy of the description.
You are describing every tyranny that has ever existed. Every ruler who ever oppressed the people he governed told himself the same story, that the people were deceived, that they could not understand what was good for them, that wiser heads must exercise power on their behalf, until consciousness was raised. That is not liberation, Karl. That is the oldest justification for despotism in all of political history, dressed in the vocabulary of the working class.
And your land value tax is the oldest trick in the Reformer's Handbook. Offer workers a modest improvement while leaving the entire structure of exploitation intact and call it a revolution. You were a radical once, George. Then you got frightened by the actual workers' movement and spent the rest of your career urging patience while the landlord class bought every legislature in the country. Your single tax is what capitalism looks like when it tries to save itself from genuine transformation.
I never abandoned the workers, and I will not accept that slander from a man who lived on factory profits while writing about factory exploitation. Engels owned mills in Manchester, Karl, real mills with real workers, and you took his money for decades without a moment of apparent discomfort. At least my income came from convincing real people that my ideas had merit. You were bankrolled by the very class you claimed to be destroying.
Engels used his position within capitalism to fund the work that would ultimately destroy capitalism. That is not hypocrisy. That is strategy.
That is the most convenient rationalization I have ever heard from anyone in any field.
Your Progress and Poverty sold millions of copies and changed essentially nothing. You were the most famous radical in America, and 40 years later, land speculation was more rampant than ever. At least my ideas produced actual revolutions. Your ideas produced a moderately successful book and a losing mayoral campaign.
The revolutions your ideas produced were catastrophes. I would rather have my losing mayoral campaign than your winning catastrophes any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Sentimentalist.
Megalomaniac.
One-book wonder.
Permanent exile who could not get along with anyone, including his own allies.
Self-educated amateur who wandered into political economy and never found his way back out.
Revolutionary whose revolution was always just around the next corner.
Tax collector costumed as a liberator.
Librarian costumed as a revolutionary. If this discussion has engaged or educated you in any way, please do like and subscribe. It costs you nothing and means a great deal to the people making these videos. And as you weigh everything you have heard, reflect on this gently. Karl Marx was a man of genuine brilliance, who inspired millions to seize power in his name, and every one of those seizures produced suffering that would have horrified any decent human being. I do not say his heart was wrong. I believe it was right. But good intentions assembled into a bad theory have consequences that outlast the intentions considerably. The land value tax asks for none of that. It asks only for justice in how we tax. No blood required.
Like and subscribe. Yes, and consider what you have actually witnessed today. Henry George, self-educated newspaper editor from San Francisco, one major book to his name, 2 failed mayoral campaigns on his record, proposed to end the exploitation of the working class by adjusting the property tax. He is a sweet man. He is genuinely kind. He is possibly the nicest person I have debated in 30 years of intellectual combat. And he is completely, irretrievably, hopelessly wrong. Subscribe regardless. But do not make any economic policy decisions based on a man whose greatest political achievement was finishing second in a New York City mayoral race to a candidate who later became president.
Theodore Roosevelt actually finished third in that race, Karl. I finished second.
My point stands entirely regardless.
Good night, everyone. This has been a genuine pleasure.
It has been something. Good night.